All right, 30 for 30. We're back. Today's subject, something that we always find these off of Twitter here, X, as we call it, X, Twitter, whatever. Talking about homelessness in China. I know, I get it. We talk about this subject a lot in the context of China. And the reason that we talk about this so much, of course, is because the Chinese government likes to act like it doesn't exist. But it does, obviously. And, that's the thing. Anytime that we have an opportunity to show that, of course, it does exist, we have to. Okay? The other thing I wanted to say, Patreon. If you want to support me at all, you'll notice here, just $1. Why? Tired, like it says here. It's not a paywall. Everything I create's free. Okay? Never gonna put some shit behind a paywall. I'm tired of tears. I'm tired of people saying, well, you gotta pay this much to get this video and do it. I don't want to do all that, man. If you want to support the cause, you can give at least $1. You can give more. That's okay. If you only want to give $1, that's okay. If you don't want to give anything, that's okay. You can be in the comment section on every video. You can say thank you. You can support the cause. You can talk shit about propaganda. That helps. But if you want to give $1 or whatever, I appreciate it. But let's talk about the video instead of giving me money, which I would appreciate. But besides that, 30 for 30, of course, homelessness, like I said, in China. When you think about it, they always want to tell you it doesn't exist. But it does. Because they want you to imagine the opposite, right? They want you to think of China as the opposite. The high-speed trains. Those skyscrapers with all the, lights, the LEDs, right? The drone shows of China. Yeah, the Communist Party. They work so hard to maintain, control and perfection, and beneath that layer of garbage that they have there are cracks, right? And one of the cracks is homelessness. And I'll be honest, I imagine the government does do some things to try and alleviate homelessness, right? But what bothers me is how they act like it doesn't exist. It does exist in China, and I know this because I've seen it with my own eyes. And when I have a government that tells me something doesn't exist, I'm sitting there staring at it, talking to it, I have a problem, okay? Every time I used to go to the train station, there was a homeless man who would sit outside and, and I'd talk to him. He was there consistently. He literally lived there. It was a overpass that would go over to the train station. And that's where he lived. He stayed there. He begged for money there. And security knew he was there. Police knew he was there. Just didn't do anything. But he wasn't aggressive. He wasn't loud. Wasn't a bad guy, I assume. He was just surviving. He said he was from like Changsha or something like that. I don't know. It's been a while, okay? And like many homeless people around the world, he was invisible, to those who chose not to see him, right? Now, China officially claims that homelessness is virtually non-existent. Now, we have a problem with that. Back in 2011, China actually had statistics, and they haven't updated in over a decade, so that's how we know that the problem is much worse than what they reported. But they reported that 2.4 million people were homeless in China, and less than 200,000 homeless children. But here's the problem. China doesn't count people who've fallen outside the system. And in China, falling outside the system, it's not hard to do, right? Because the system sucks, okay? Start with what's called the hukou system. For people that don't know what the hukou system is, because we don't have that in America, we don't have that in the West, it's a household registration program that ties your access to services, education, and housing to your birthplace. So If you were born in a rural village, but you moved to the city for work, as some 300 million migrant workers in China have done, you don't get the same rights as registered city residents. That means you could be working full time in Beijing or Shanghai, but be completely cut off from basic services like healthcare or subsidized housing. I used to know people that they moved to Guangzhou for work, and as soon as they had kids, they cried themselves to sleep every night because they knew that eventually they would have to move back because their children wouldn't be able to go to school there, because their children or whatever were born in their hometown, they were from their hometown, blah, 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 and maybe that place was 800 miles away, whatever, right? So when people talk about homelessness in China, we're not just talking about someone sleeping on a bench, we're talking about the migrant worker crammed into a filthy shared basement with 15 other men. There's no lease, there's no official address, and no support. We're talking about the elderly woman that got kicked out of her village home with nowhere to go after a land dispute, right? We're talking about the mentally ill wandering train stations, or the refugees, people that are sleeping at the McDonald's. It's a common thing. We call them the McRefugees, right? Because you can see people sleeping at the McDonald's, because McDonald's in China is open 24 hours, but they've got nowhere else to go. So let's be clear, homelessness doesn't always look the same in every country. In the West, we often think of tents on the sidewalk and cardboard signs. In China, it's often hidden, not because it doesn't exist, but because it's covered up. It's swept away before important events, moved out of the view when foreigners arrive, or simply just ignored through silence and censorship, I guess you could say. And really, that brings us to the most disturbing part. The problem isn't just that homelessness exists. The problem is that China refuses to admit that it exists. It's like watching someone bleeding from a head wound while they insist that they're fine, okay? It's inhumane, not only to the people who are suffering, but to the people that are actually trying to help them, because there are good people in China, of course. We got to remember here, China is just like everyone else. The Chinese people are good people. Okay, and what we don't understand is, here's what some people don't understand anyways, is that people want to live outside the system, right? Not everyone becomes homeless because of failure or bad luck. Some people just reject the pressure, the rules, the surveillance. They want to be free, right? And that's their choice. And in a free country, you're allowed to make that choice, even if it looks unconventional. In China, choosing a non-conforming lifestyle is seen as a rebellion. So for those who choose to live differently are targeted, they're harassed, or worse, even institutionalized, right? And there are people trying to help, okay? Believe it or not, to be fair, China does have social workers. And, shelters do exist, okay? Cities like Guangdong, they have reunification programs to help reconnect the homeless with their families. I don't want to say that they're non-existent. They do. They do have certain efforts of these types of things in China. They're not the best. They don't work the greatest. And they're not always everywhere. That's for sure. Don't get me wrong here. But during the COVID lockdowns, even Wuhan opened shelters to temporarily house stranded people, okay? So there are some initiatives, right, that do show some compassion and function, right? To help with some safety nets. It's definitely, don't get me wrong, the safety nets in China are nothing like in the West. Okay, during COVID, we gave out money. In China, they gave out nothing, okay? But here's the twist. Because the government refuses to admit that homelessness exists, even those are rare victories are buried, right? Because there are good people in China who work hard to help others, but they get no recognition. Why? Because admitting they did something good would mean admitting that there was something bad to begin with. Okay? That's the cost of pretending to be perfect. You lose your ability to improve. You sabotage your own progress. You erase your own humanitarian wins. You tell the world a lie so aggressively that you end up choking on your own truth. And that leads to a deeper issue. China's inability to show its success. Okay, think about that. You have cases where someone was taken off the streets, helped by a program, reconnected with their family, Maybe they were housed or employed, but that story can't be told because the story proves that there was homelessness to begin with. That's how broken the narrative is. In the pursuit of false perfection, China ends up silencing even its own victories. Right? And then they say, well, what about America? Right? But that's a deflection. That's not a solution. Because let's address that while we're here. I mean, hey, why not? It's a video, right? The argument that we always hear from the CCP crowd is, but what about America? Look at the tent cities in San Francisco. Look at the homelessness crisis in the U.S. Yeah, let's look at it. It's real. It's ugly. And we talk about it. We allow our media to show it. We allow activists and journalists to cover it. We allow citizens to criticize it. And the reason we allow it is because we know it's a problem. And we want to fix it. We've got good people that want to fix the problem of homelessness in America. Okay? That's the difference. We don't pretend that it doesn't exist. We don't arrest people for filming it. We don't censor the words homelessness on the internet. We face it, even if slowly, even if imperfectly. You see, China can't fix the problem because it won't even name it. You can't treat an illness you refuse to diagnose. And the CCP is more focused on maintaining appearances and creating solutions. And what makes this, their whataboutism nothing more than a distraction, a weak, cowardly defense mechanism that fools no one who's, that's paying attention, right? It fools no one. If you're paying attention, you see it there with your own eyes, you're not fooled, right? I'm not fooled. I seen it there in China. I remember that man at the train station. I don't know what happened to him. Maybe he was moved. Maybe he was taken away. Maybe he's still there. I don't know, right? But just in a spot I can't see anymore, right? Who knows? What I do know is that he was real. He had a name, a story, a past, and he didn't fit the narrative. But he deserved to be seen. In this story, I'm not just telling my story. I'm telling his story. And I'm reminding the world that behind the stats, the censorship, the polished image, that there are millions like him in China, right? That are forgotten, that are ignored, and they're being erased, right? China doesn't get to pretend this isn't happening, okay? The rest of the world doesn't have to play along. We know that homelessness in China does exist, and there's evidence all over the internet. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, well, then I guess just thank you for enjoying it. But share it, and check out that Patreon if you'd like there. Thank you so much, and have a good day.